Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about some of the alternate ways of writing common words in Japanese which you are going to encounter in your immersion, assuming that you haven't already. You probably have. And these are things that nobody ever explains properly. What I mean by that is that the dictionaries most often put these alternatives into the same entry as the main kanji for the word, leaving you to assume that these are just different ways of writing exactly the same thing, and they're not. The other thing they do, which is the opposite mistake, is to give them their own entry with their own specific meaning, leaving you to believe that this is a different word with the same pronunciation that's not interchangeable with the main kanji, and this again is incorrect. So let's start with one of the most basic words in Japanese, which is miru, which is written with this kanji that we all know, an eye on legs that goes around the place, looking, seeing, watching. And when I say that, looking, seeing, and watching, we can see that the word miru overlaps on the meaning spectrum with at least 3 other English words, look, see, and watch. There aren't separate Japanese words for these 3 things. One of the ways Japanese deals with this is that miru often has helpers attached to its stem to refine the meaning. So we have words like mieru, mitsukeru, mikakeru, etc. But another thing it does is that it uses different kanji to write the base word miru, showing its different implications. So one that you'll see very commonly is this one, and its meaning is watch. It's probably closest to the English word watch, but it means it in the particular sense of watching a movie, watching a ball game, watching a play or something like that. It's the word we use when we settle down to put our full attention on something and watch it, not just look at it or see it. So what does the kanji mean? Where does it come from? It has 3 elements, and one of them is that base kanji see, the eye on legs that goes around watching things. It also has a bird and an arrow. That thing in the upper left-hand corner is a variant of the arrow kanji. Now, if we cast our mind back a few hundred years, if somebody wanted to shoot a bird, there were no shotguns. You had to do it with an arrow, and that was an awful lot harder than doing it with a shotgun. You had to watch that bird very, very carefully, take very careful aim in order to hit a bird with a single arrow, because you're not going to get a second chance. This is the kind of intense watching that this kanji represents. In the modern word miru, the particular aspect of this that it's boiled down to is the kind of watching we mentioned, watching a movie, watching a ball game, watching something. But we mustn't assume that this is what the kanji always means outside the context of the word miru. Its on-reading is kan, and it's always concerned with watching things closely in one way or another, but not necessarily in the same sense as when it's used in miru. Now, the next version of miru that we commonly encounter is this one. This again has the eye on legs, the basic miru kanji, and next to it is the kanji which means originally an altar, a place where religious things, a god, a statue, a religious artifact is displayed. So the derivative meaning of this is show. And when it's written in miru, what this becomes refined down to is seeing in the sense of investigating, observing closely, not in the sense of watching a play or watching a ball game, but in the sense of observing something closely, investigating it, examining it. And if we wanted a mnemonic for this, we might say that just as altars are places of religious observance, this version of miru really overlaps with the English word observe. And again, we shouldn't assume that that's the way it's refined down in every use of this kanji. Its on-reading is shi, and what it means as a kanji is essentially the very basic phenomenon of seeing itself. So Shikaku means the sense of sight itself, one of the 5 senses, the one that allows us to see. And we could see this as being the God-given gift of sight. It's also used in shiryoku, which is eyesight, a person's individual power of seeing. Now, these are the 3 main variants of the word mirror in its regular senses that will tend to be lumped together by the dictionaries as if they were all the same thing. There are other mirrors, and we'll often see these two. The dictionaries tend to treat these as if they were completely different words, but as we're going to see, they're not. These two are both medical mirrors. The first one is essentially what a doctor does, and the second one is essentially what a nurse does. The first one means examining in a medical sense. The second one means looking in the sense of looking after, at least when it's used in the word mirror. So this one, which has a word, and then an element which is the sound sister, shim. And whenever we see this kanji in anything other than mirror, it's usually going to be pronounced shim, and it's very dedicated to medical examination. That's really what this kanji is about. So we have it in words like shindan, which is a medical examination. The other one has an eye and a hand. It represents an eye shaded with a hand looking at something, and outside of mirror we see it in words like kanban, which is a signboard, as you'd see in front of a shop or in front of a station, and you might shade your eyes to look up at it. But in terms of the word mirror, it has this specific medical sense. It also has this sense in words like kanbyo, which is looking after a sick person, watching over a sick person. But in terms of mirror, it specifically means watching in the sense of watching over a sick person, while this one means looking at in the sense of a doctor looking at a person. We often find this in the expression oisha-san ni mite morau, which means have a doctor look at one. It's very often translated extremely confusingly and structurally destructively as see a doctor. But that's not what it means at all. You might say that in English, but it isn't you that's doing the seeing of the doctor. It's the doctor that's doing the seeing of you. And that's what oisha-san ni mite morau means. It means have the doctor look at one. And I've done a whole video on this use of morau, so you can take a look at that if you'd like to know more about it. Now, when I was explaining this in the course of that video, one of my commenters said, I've written it wrongly. I wrote it like this, mite morau, and I should have written it like this, mite morau. And this isn't in fact true. The reason I use the simple mirror kanji is because that's the one I assume everybody knows. But my commenter, looking in the dictionary, quite reasonably supposed from the way they put things that the only way you can say this kind of mirror being examined by a doctor is by using the special kanji, but that's not the case. This isn't a completely separate word. It's another specialized variant of mirror, and it's always the case with these kind of groups. You could always use the base kanji, the simple kanji, in place of any of the other meanings. You can use the specialized kanji if you want to, but you don't have to. Now, there are also several other ways of writing mirror, but they're a bit more obscure, not used so often, and I'm not going to throw our minds into confusion by bringing them in at this point. These are the main ones that you need to know for immersion. And if you like, I'll look at more kanji alternatives in the future. I've already done one video on the kanji alternatives for wakaru, and I think this is probably an area, because it's so very little covered by textbooks, dictionaries, websites, or anybody else, that we could profitably go more deeply into. But let me know what you think about that in the comments below. And of course, if you have other questions or comments, please put them in the comments below as well. I'd like to thank my gold Kokeshi patrons, and all my patrons and supporters, all my Kokeshis, who are my producer angels who make these videos possible. And I'd like to thank everyone who subscribes to this channel, who gives me likes and words of encouragement, because all of this is helping me to go forward, to build the channel, and to build a new way of learning and understanding Japanese. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします。Class dismissed.